On August 28, 2010, a new chapter of history was written at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children of all races, cultures, and creeds came together from all over this country and the world to peacefully lend their prayers, their voices, their unwavering support for restoration of honor in America. They gave thanks to real American heroes and paid tribute to a sacred plot of ground so prominent in our country's history.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
And to the men and women whose footsteps left indelible impressions in the very soil where they now stood.
My city, Shreveport, Louisiana, I can tell you genuinely there were at least 100 people who said, I wish I was going with you.
It's God. That's what we're trying to get back to. We all have a strong belief.
I didn't want to do this without him. I didn't want to do this without my wife.
Honor, I mean, what better thing to gather for us?
I am very happy to see so many patriots here on the front line standing up for their country.
We just want them to get what was put into us years and years ago.
Where are you guys coming from?
Indiana.
South Bend.
Lexington, Kentucky.
North Dakota.
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Oklahoma.
Philadelphia.
City of Liberty, Philly.
USA! USA! USA!
It's not about being against anything or anybody. My husband and I are here because we want to stand for something.
It brings you an hour to restore honor in America. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Beck. Hello, America!
My first reaction was that it was going to be the typical Glenn thing where he has this big idea and then 2 days later has a different big idea, so the first big idea gets canceled.
Here we go again.
The initial reaction was, you're out of your mind.
Not good. I did not think that it would ever happen.
It's just like, there's no way.
You don't react to the early Glenn ideas.
No.
Because that's just a waste of time.
He will come to us sometimes and say, we need to go to space. We need to, as a company, build a rocket ship large enough to hold all 40 employees, and we need to launch it into space. And it needs to orbit the Earth 38 times and return to Earth and land in the desert in California. Yeah. We'll be like, really? Yeah, get started on that, make that happen, just do it. And then we'll start on it, and then like 3 days later it'll be, no, we're not going to the moon, I think we need to sail around the planet.
And everyone who works here has been the idiot that has a half-built spaceship in their backyard.
I've got 3.
So I can stick them up on the board.
But this time was different. As the weeks and then months passed, the big idea didn't go away. In fact, it just kept getting bigger.
You know, I think with Glenn, you know, it's just, you get so used to him raising the bar continually that...
And so it was all pink and purple.
You're never really thrown by it. You just say, okay, let's do it.
But not everyone was convinced.
I really felt that this time, I'm not going to be able to turn this corner.
We went to our houses of worship and we said, God help us.
The big idea was born at Seattle's Safeco Field during a highly controversial speaking engagement. The trip back home had been a difficult one. There were protests when he was awarded the key to his childhood hometown of Mount Vernon, Washington, and more of the same in Seattle prior to the Safeco event.
I was on a plane going to Seattle, and I wrote in my diary in the days that I still kept a diary, but I wrote in my diary I haven't told anybody this before, a farewell to my children. Because I was going out to an event in Seattle where the death threats were very high. And I was flying out there and I thought, this may be it. And what is it I want to say to my children? And what is it I want to say to my wife? And so I wrote it in my diary and I handed it to Joe. And I didn't explain, I just closed up my diary and put a rubber band around it. And I just said, if something happens, just give this to my family. And it was a really soul-searching 6-hour flight. And then I walked out, it was at Seattle Safeco Field. And I walked out and it was the most humbling experience because somebody was on stage. And when I walked out onto the field amidst all these people, people turned and stood and applauded. And it was, I think it was 10,000 people. And I just couldn't fathom that. It just was so humbling. And I could feel the energy when I got up and gave the speech. I could feel the energy. And I could see how these people had come together. You know, in Seattle, they had to pass the protesters and all of the other stuff. And they came together, and it meant something. And obviously, I survived the weekend. And I was on the plane back home, and I said to Joe, we have to do that. That's where the American Revival came from. So we have to do that. The idea of the Lincoln Memorial wasn't far behind, because I said we should do these American revivals and put them back to back and then lead to one final in Washington. And I think Joe had said, like, a Tea Party thing, and I said, no, let's use the Lincoln Memorial as the backdrop, because no one trusts the Capitol. That's yelling at a building. Instead, we should have Lincoln behind, because that's sending the message to the people. The building's never going to get the message. Politicians are never going to get the message. People need to get the message that you can be great. You can do great things. You can be the next Abraham Lincoln.
But I want you to start right here. I want you to look each other in the eye. I want you to dig down deep inside, and I want you to say, the science is not settled. We will not sit down. We will not shut up. We will stand.
I remember standing on the stage at the Villages, and we were surrounded by 25,000 people, and I made the announcement.
He stood there and he announced the plan, which was that Glenn was going to go out there and mobilize a political force, that we were going to register voters, we were going to educate voters, we were going to put voters in the streets.
I think it was, two can play this game.
And the crowd responded to that, just cheering and yelling and very excited.
And as I said those words, I just broke out in a cold sweat.
I remember him coming off the stage, and it was so loud, he grabbed me by the lapels.
Well, we're screaming at each other because we're surrounded by people in the round. And I said, I don't know how we're wrong, but we're wrong.
And I was just stunned. We got back on the bus, and I said, what do you mean we're wrong? And he said, this message just isn't right. It's not the right message.
We're supposed to be better than that.
Wrong message or not, The cat was out of the bag. The plan for 828 in the nation's capital was widely reported in the press. Accounts ranged from skeptical to conspiratorial. All assumed, as had been the original intent, it would be purely political.
He was very stressed out about that because he felt compelled to do the event, thought it was one thing. Turns out that then he didn't feel right about that at all, and then was left with, I don't know what it is, for quite a while. We kept saying we're 2% off or 5% off, and really we're more like 50 or 100% off because it wasn't political at all.
There comes a point in the process with Glenn when he converts from this sort of general idea to something he can actually see. He can see it happening.
The epiphany came around Christmas. It was the realization that the answer would not be found in politics at all, that in fact there was only one possible solution to the crisis in America.
Faith in God, understanding who He is. Hope, tell the truth, be honest, do the right thing. And charity, serve God, serve your fellow man. The faith, hope, and charity really came to me over the holidays when I designed those paintings and painted them. I painted them and I kind of put them together and went, oh my gosh, wait a minute, that's it. Those are the missing pieces.
With the new year, faith, hope, and charity became the cornerstone, the underpinning of not only the Restoring Honor Rally planning, but it became the foundation for the Glenn Beck program on both TV and radio.
Last year, I said this was going to be historic. I told the staff, this is historic.
And when you're out there, you see over the tops of these things anyway.
He's a brilliant person. He's assembled a great team around him who've always been able to execute on his vision. But I really felt that this time, I'm not going to be able to turn this corner. And a few months ago, we were down in Washington, D.C., and Glenn stopped by the Lincoln Memorial site. And I think it hit him too a little bit as to, what have I done? I used to work in Washington, D.C., and I knew the vastness of this area. I didn't think we'd ever fill it.
Initially, I think the concept was like, okay, something exciting, something new. And then the more we started getting into it and started working with all the different agencies and the different contractors, I realized what a big feat this was. And the gravity and the massiveness of the project was just like, there's no way. I mean, this is a crazy, crazy idea.
I believe we do, but if not, let's get one.
As if the enormous challenge of staging the event wasn't enough. As the calendar raced closer to the 828 date, the attacks from critics and the press intensified.
Reverend Glenn Beck, who's going to be leading this, I don't know what.
They are planning, I guess you could say, an invasion of the nation's capital this weekend.
The beckoning is coming.
There were threats, counter rallies planned, new concerns, new obstacles.
We're getting a lot of mail from people saying, Glenn, you've asked to bring our families. Yes, I have. You're going to have to decide. I haven't seen a budget in a while, but I believe the biggest expense on 828, and it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, is security. This is the nation's capital. I will tell you that the next meeting we have, just because it's scheduled this way, is with Secret Service. The best and the brightest will be there. We are unfortunately having to live in a world where we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on security.